Hello and welcome to another video. Today we're going to make a dish that's become one of my favorite pieces of German cuisine, which is kind of funny because it didn't really come from Germany. During the Cold War, Germany was split between about World War II and I think 1987 was when the Berlin Wall fell, and 1989 I think was when reunification was complete. So within that time period, you had two different countries with two very different economic systems, two very different relations to the rest of the world. And consequently, cooking was very different in the East than in the West. People tend to maybe assume that Western food was much better than Eastern food, but in reality, that's not necessarily the case. This soup, Soljanka, started off as a Russian soup, which was very popular in the Soviet Union. But when the Germans took it, they took it in a slightly different direction, and they made their own version of it. So the Russian version might have olives and capers and stuff. The German version doesn't. The German version imported some culinary options from Hungary and some other things. And created a soup which is delicious, but also fundamentally German in its overall approach. So I'm going to present to you East German Soljanka. The ingredients in East German Soljanka are extremely simple. We have kesseler. If you're in the US, you can use ham. I have here about 250 grams. That's about, 8 ounces. Here I have some meat sausage. If you're this is a jagdwurst, which is one of the sort of major workhorses in German cuisine, and especially was in East German cuisine. If you're in the US, you could use bologne. You could use bochwurst if you can find it. You could also use maybe Polish sausage or even hot dogs. But it's not so much of this. I have about 50 grams here to maybe 250 grams of the kesseler. And this is probably enough for me for at least 2 meals. But this reheats nicely and it's easier to make in a slightly larger bit. Here I have a small onion, about 100 grams. And then we have 3 more major ingredients. We have pickles and, more importantly, pickle juice. We have Letscho, which is basically onions and paprika, or red bell peppers, stewed in tomatoes. You can find, if you can't find Letscho, or under its Hungarian name, Letscho, you can possibly make your own. Maybe I'll cover that in another video at some point. And then finally, in the event where this needs a little bit of extra thickening, we will use ketchup. The really interesting flavor management of this dish is salt management. So try to use a less salty, meaty ham like this. Try to... or a kesseler. If you put in too much jagdwurst or similar sausages, it will be too salty. Pickles, of course, add a lot of salt, as does the pickle juice. This Letscho will add a bit of salt, and finally the ketchup will add salt. So this will be salted entirely through these 3 ingredients, which also help form the main broth. So these are the ones you vary the amount of salt. Now in the US, a lot of your pickles are more sour than the pickles in Germany, so maybe use a little bit less and a smaller amount of the pickle juice, and maybe make up for it with a little more ketchup. I'm going to start by turning my burner on high and adding just a little bit of cooking oil to the bottom of the pan. You don't really need to add much, and it's no problem if this sticks. But as soon as this starts to get hot, in will go the kesseler. And once the kesseler's cooking nicely, then I'll add the onions and the sausage. So we'll be back in a few moments. So I'm feeling the oil is hot. So in goes the kesseler, and we're going to let it cook for a couple minutes. Then we'll add the onions and the sausage. So I'll be back in a couple minutes, and we'll add those. Now, you can probably see right here at the back that this is in fact sticking to the pan. That's perfectly fine. It won't stay stuck, but this has been cooking now for a minute or two, and I think it's cooking okay, so I'm going to add the onions, stir those in. Now, in the Russian version of the dish, they'll throw in whatever other meat scraps they have. The more different kinds, the better. In the German version of the dish, it's just all pork and pork sausage. That's kind of one big difference, but it's not the only difference. At some point, maybe I'll do a Russian Soljanka too, and you can see the differences. So now I'm going to let this cook for another minute or two, and I'm going to stir it. Actually, I'm going to cut one of the pickles and measure out some Letscho. So first, in goes the pickle. I'm going to stir this up a little bit. And then I'm going to add about maybe half to a third to half of this bottle of Letscho. This is a 680 gram bottle, so about 330 grams. And you can see it's mostly bell peppers in the sort of tomato sauce. And now I'm going to stir this in really well. Ooh, and that's smelling good. And as I do, I'm going to make sure that I pay attention to the bottom of the pan and make sure that everything that's been sticking to it starts to come up. I'm also going to turn the heat down from a high to about a medium. Ooh, that's smelling really good. And you can see, if you could remember, this was pretty sticky and brown. Now that's all up into the broth. A little piece of onion that didn't make it, we can throw it in. Now I'm going to add some water to form some broth, and then I'm going to add some pickle juice. So the best way to figure out proportions is just to try a few different times and taste and correct. I don't mind it if there's a little bit of oil floating on top. Some people do. If you do mind, add less water and more Letscho and or ketchup. So I'm going to make this into kind of like a heavy stew consistency right now, and pour in some pickle juice. As I mentioned before, the amount of pickle juice you want to use depends very much on the flavor of the pickle juice. So, ooh, that smells good. And you can see this is forming up nicely. I'm going to add a little bit of ketchup to thicken. Let this heat up, and then I'll add some more water and repeat the process as necessary. So it's been a while, and now it's boiling again. I just tasted it, and it's actually tasting pretty good. I'm going to let that continue for a little bit. I think this can use a little more water. And if I'm going to do that, I better add a bit more pickle juice. and a bit more ketchup. Again, if your pickle juice is really sour, add a lot less of it and just add more ketchup. But you probably want a little bit of that sourness, a little bit of the vinegariness from the pickles in the soup anyway. So yeah, this is looking good. I'm going to go ahead and taste. Seems promising. We'll let it cook for about 5 or 10 more minutes, and then I may correct the flavors again. So I've added some water. I've added some more pickle juice, some more ketchup. The flavor is not quite where I want it, so I'm going to explain how to think about correcting the flavors. If it's too salty, of course, the first thing to add is water. If it's not salty enough, but it's too sour, add a little bit of water and some ketchup. If the flavors don't seem to come together right, actually that's pretty good. If the flavors don't seem to come together right, and you can't really put your finger on it, let it cook some more for the flavors to kind of blend. As you cook it, you're going to pick up some smoky flavor from the ham, and you're going to pick up some various flavors from the sausage as well. And then if it doesn't have enough vegetables, add more Letscho. But that's basically how to correct. The only way I think to make this soup is to taste and correct until you get it where you want it. And enjoy it that way. So I'm going to serve myself a nice bowl, and or I'll serve myself a small amount and do a taste test, and then I will have the rest of it maybe for lunch today and tomorrow. This is looking really nice. And it's smelling really nice. And so here is the East German Soljanka. I'm going to go ahead and taste it now, and but this ought to be really delicious. You can see the pieces of pickle, you can see the bell peppers. Bell peppers, by the way, are not found in the Russian version. A lot of meat, and it smells really, really good. This is one of my favorite soups from any cuisine. It's not the only soup, you know, that I like to make, but you know, this is definitely up there at the top. And this is just delicious. Wow. Again, have to learn how to make this. This is absolutely delicious. Enjoy. Bon appetit. Guten Appetit.